Welcome, another episode, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights, here with the founder of Sports Card Investors, Geoff Wilson. Welcome, Geoff. I want to thank our sponsors, Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication, ComC, that's comc.com, out in the Seattle area, Burbank Sports Cards, Mike Stadium Sports Cards in Aurora, Colorado, Heritage Auctions, Huggins & Scott Auctions, Topps, Panini, and Upper Deck. Great sponsors. Geoff's got great sponsors. Patronize the sponsors. If you do, you're supporting the industry. The industry is healthy because there's a lot of activity. Mm-hmm. And a lot of activity is buying and selling cards. If people went to card shows and treated them as a museum experience, we wouldn't be having this discussion. And so Geoff has done an excellent job in his podcast and other means of communicating with collectors, I guess all over the world. I've got people all over the world. I'm sure you do too.
I do.
Communicating with them and demystifying this experience of buying and selling cards. And whether you consider yourself an investor or just a collector, if you buy and sell cards, I recommend you listen to Sports Card Investors. So you had an excellent article that I really thought was a great encapsulation of 20 aspects to consider that the new collector should be aware of. And I thought that was excellent. I didn't push way back from them, but I looked at it from the lens of a more experienced collector, seeing that some of your reasons were almost always true. Mm-hmm. Do you ever do, now that I know what you do you ever study Clayton Christensen's work? The disruptive technology
I do.
guy?
Yeah,
okay.
sure.
Well, I went to Harvard for a number of years in one of their advanced management programs and had Clayton Christensen, who's an amazing guy. And his latest book, though, is How Will You Measure Your Life? It's after he had a cancer scare or whatever. Okay, so
I haven't read that one. No, I've read.
Okay, so it's not as much about the disruptive technologies, which is fascinating and disruptive technologies are always about underserved and non-served. His statement there is that it's easier to have 100% habit than a 98% habit. In other words, people can say, I'm just never going to do this, or I'm always going to do this. That's just who I am. That's what I'm going to do. That's easier than saying, I usually do this. 90% of the time I do something. If you say, I'm going to do it. Okay. That's the way I look at your 20 reasons. You were putting them in terms of always.
That's true.
Because it's a lot easier and more palatable to say, I just need to focus on getting graded cards.
Correct. Because
there's a level of assurance, and you're not committing any crimes, but you're just saying, I'm going to define this way as a way to do it and make sense of what could be a confusing. So in the spirit of that, I'm saying I'm going against the Clayton Christensen thing of saying some habits. I mean, if you're an alcoholic, then you might say there's some alcoholics that say I need to not drink so much, but most of them say I can't drink anymore.
Right.
They have to say I'm
have to be 100% out.
100%.
Yeah.
Okay. So you kind of put things in 100% terms. I backed off to 90%.
Yeah.
But I think some of them are pretty close to 100%. So let me give you a chance to respond to that and work our way down this list. Again, I recommend listeners check out Geoff's original episode, which I don't remember what episode.
I think it was called 20. Well, my list was called 20 things.
No, I know, but was it episode 45 or 50 or whatever it was? I don't.
Oh, that I don't number my episode. Okay. So yeah, you could just search for 20 things new Sports Card Investors.
People know I'm the numbers guy.
Right. All of yours are numbered. You're getting on up there with your numbers.
Getting up there with the numbers.
You are.
Okay. So, but anyway, that's what we're saying.
Yeah.
And so let's go through 20 because I thought they were very helpful.
Yeah.
And especially in that context, they are very applicable.
Well, you mentioned graded cards. That's a good example. So when I tell a new investor, one of my absolutes to them is buy graded cards. Now, obviously, if they're trying to buy the brand new release, if they're trying to buy 2019 Prism basketball right now, there's not a lot of those yet that have come back from grading. So it doesn't work with a brand new release. But if they're trying to buy 2018, 2017, 2016, my advice to them is always buy graded. And I have people retort that, and you'll see my YouTube comments where people say, that's bad advice to say always buy graded because you can pick up some raw cards that can be in gem mint condition. And there's people out there who buy raw cards and send them in for grading, and they make a lot of money that way because they pick out the raw cards that could grade high. And my response to that is, you're correct, but you're assuming that the person has the level of knowledge and expertise and experience to be able to look at a raw card and evaluate the raw card and know it's going to grade a 9.5 versus a 9. And I'm trying to simplify things for an audience that is coming in and probably hasn't built that expertise yet. Okay. Now I just got a new dimension of Geoff Wilson is that actually what you're saying is even in the demystification, people can provoke controversy. Mm-hmm. So I don't think you were intending to be controversial in being absolute,
But then I guess you got other pushback. My pushback was not, it was gentle pushback.
Right.
So you're saying you had people vociferously, responding to your
Oh,
claim?
I get.
and was that intentional? Because a lot of being on the internet, of being viral, is being controversial.
Yes.
And so did you have that intent, or
No.
are you brilliant to know that that's going to strike a nerve?
My show has become, in certain audiences, very controversial. I never intended it to be that way. And I do not intentionally try to say anything that I would consider to be controversial. But what is controversial is the very nature of looking at sports cards from an investment standpoint. Oh. And there's a large crowd of collectors who do not like the fact that a lot of more investment-minded or even flipping-minded people have entered the hobby, because this group of people is driving prices up for the collectors who would otherwise, like
be able to get all the good stuff for less money.
You got it.
So they're purists.
They're purists.
Sort of. And they're,
And they think the hobby should be fun, and they don't think you can mix fun and business. And they think investing is business and the hobby is fun. And I fundamentally disagree with that. I personally mix fun and business. I love collecting. I have a passion for collecting, and I do it from a hobby standpoint. At the same time, I also mix in business.
40 years ago, they said the same thing.
Yeah.
I was doing the price guides. I said, you're going to ruin everything because there was an elite group of people, of which I was one, that knew what cards were going for. Do not do a price guide, because then everybody will know what cards are worth, and then I won't be able to have the inside track. And I said, actually, the pool is going to greatly be increased of knowledgeable people. There'll be more cards coming out. I was right. I think you're right, is that more knowledge, especially now in 2020, knowledge is power.
It is power.
Okay? And people, if they don't have the knowledge and they're not sure, they cover their wallet.
Yep.
Once they're equipped to say, hey, I can compete. I've got the knowledge. And frankly, on some level, you're helping them to compete very quickly on a small number of cards that they can really track.
Right.
And it's their favorite player, probably.
So along those lines, another thing that I said that I know you had a little bit of pushback on was, I said, if you're going to invest in football cards, buy quarterbacks.
Yeah.
If you're going to invest in baseball cards, buy home run hitters.
Right.
And if you're going to invest in basketball cards, buy shooters.
Right.
Very, very black and white. Right. And I think you pointed out in your episode, well, actually, there can be a lot of value in a great defensive player in the NFL, because they're often overlooked. Their cards are not going for much money. The new release comes out and no one's chasing the defensive star. They're chasing the quarterback. And I think that's a very fair point. But I also think for the brand new person coming in the hobby, I want them to understand that, if they're investing in Kyler Murray or Daniel Jones, or one of the other rookie quarterbacks this year, those are the cards that, if that person goes on to become a star quarterback and win the Super Bowl in the future, those cards are going to be the ones that appreciate and become more sought after than a defensive player like Bosa from San Francisco. Right. Amazing player. And his cards probably will also be sought after and hold value, because he could potentially go on to be one of these all-time great type of defensive players. But even still, if you compare JJ Watt, who's in that boat today, to a Patrick Mahomes, there's Patrick Mahomes is obviously much hotter right now.
Well, I mean, I take your point, and I think you're 90% right. The problem is that those 10%, the exceptions, wind up being requiring your investor type, who may be new to the industry, to interpolate or extrapolate, and that's a higher level. I mean, they're already doing that Patrick Mahomes is better than Daniel Jones or something, or perceived to have greater potential. But then when you go to the other side of the ball, what if it's half price? What if it's 1/10 the price? Again, this is a hobby that's demand driven, and if there's demand, and you can't say if the demand is half, the price is half. The demand is half, the price might be 1/4.
Correct.
Because it's whatever that is, logarithmic or
it is. And that's one of the I'm about to do.
And you're going to do some stuff like that in your new endeavors, probably.
I am, and I'm going to do an episode as well. In fact, the next episode I'm going to put out is on lessons I've learned since coming back into the hobby as an investor. One of the lessons I learned is that logarithmic kind of exponential scale that you just referred. Right. When I first came back in, I thought that, okay, well, if I could have one Luka card, or if I could have the next 10 rookies of his class combined, if I could have a Trey plus a Shea plus all of the other rookies that year, Michael Porter and Mitchell Robinson and on down the list, I would rather have, well, of course, those 10 are going to be more valuable, because just think of how great those 10 as a combination would be versus one guy. But the truth is, as you get that super popular player like a Luka, the more popular the player becomes, the more great they become. There's an exponential increase in their card prices that the next layer of players below them never get to experience. And that's a lesson that I learned.
Okay. You're right, but it's tortoise and hare. You know, and in my collecting, I've been the tortoise in that, and I've publicly said, I buy a little bit, sell a little bit. But when I'm on ComC, I have a 10-year selling horizon and I have a long tail perspective.
Yep.
Okay. And so at the end of 10 years, I bet I can catch up with you in your strategy.
Yeah.
But you're going to clobber me in year 1 and year 2 and year 3. Okay. And most people want what you're saying. Okay. And that's the reason I can buy low supply, low demand cards I can buy them cheaply and they're not going to sell. But when they do sell, they're going to sell for a lot more than what I paid for them. But I am more patient and more knowledgeable than most people.
Yep.
Okay. I'm also not most people. And so if you were writing an article for me, it would be a very short article.
Yes.
But you're writing for the other people.
I would let you write the article.
It's 20. You have 20 excellent concepts and ideas. Okay.
Sure.
And so that's a good one. And it allows people to get a handle on it. I don't need that. And some of my old friends don't need that.
Sure.
But most of the people, almost all the people need that. And it's good advice.
Well, and you're absolutely right. And it's my mission with Sports Card Investor is to try to simplify what has become a very complicated hobby for newer people who are getting into it and looking at it from an investment standpoint. And so, yes, on my list, I do make claims of absolutes that for a super experienced collector and investor such as yourself, well, maybe that's not an absolute. Maybe that's a 90% rule. Yeah. But I think for someone new getting in, if you try to give them too many 90% rules, that 10% is going to really confuse them.
I totally agree. I mentioned this the other night at the dinner that the listeners will be finding out about. But I had a conversation with Brent Higgins, the PWCC guy, very engaging guy and has a very nice business and approach to business. He has detractors, but on the other hand, he's done very well on the consignment to eBay business. But he mentioned that he also has this very bullish view, obviously, and is doing well. His bullish view is that we are at the tip of the iceberg of the number of collectors out there. And that when he's considering the potential for his business, as you may have done similar math, is that how many collectors are out there right now? How many people go to the shows? How many people do XYZ right now? That might be a couple million people. His target is 20 million.
Yeah.
He said there are 20 million collectors out there that either used to be collectors, are collectors, or will be collectors based on the demographics, their love of sports, and the fact that they either, like I say, were a collector. Do you disagree? I mean, it sounds like you're pitching to the 20 million
I absolutely agree that there's
huge upside.
I absolutely agree that there's a much larger number and that every day the hobby is growing substantially. And I believe it will continue to grow substantially every single month for the next few years.
All we have to have is some people that used to get our magazine come back and say, hey, they're still making cards and they're actually more beautiful than they are
Which,
now.
by the way, that's me. I used to get your magazine and was out of the hobby and I'm back and
I know, but that's millions. That's millions.
There is. The one thing I am worried about though is how many of those potentially 20 million, to use his number, will stick around beyond a few years. And that I don't know. Is it, are these people
Well, I mean, your job and and we're running out of time here, but I mean, my goal, your goal as well is to have them come in and have a positive experience.
Yes.
And if Brent, if you're listening, if you're off by 50%,
it's still a good number.
I'm fine with that.
It's still a good number.
If you're exaggerating, it's only 10 million.
There you go.
Oh, I'm not going to lose any sleep over that. But again, thanks to Geoff's efforts here, we want to have people having a positive experience
100%.
in this. And
come in the hobby and stay in the hobby because they're loving it and having a great experience.
Well, out of time again. Time goes quickly when you're having fun. And again, this is a hobby after all. Geoff, keep up the good work.
Appreciate it.
And we'll talk again.
Thank you.